bronze. What is it? How is it created? And what was it used for in ancient times? I'll be answering all of these questions in this video, as well as trying to create my own bronze tool. So first, what is bronze? Bronze is a metal alloy that is around 88% copper, and the remaining 12% can be either tin or silicon or even arsenic, but most of the time it's made of tin. Now, the Bronze Age lasted from around 3300 BCE to 1200 BCE and was an era of technological growth. During this time, bronze was used to upgrade any tool or weapon that was either made of stone or copper, since bronze was harder and lasted longer than both. Examples of upgraded technology are axes, swords, plows. Bronze was also used to make art and sculptures and musical instruments like bells. But those upgraded tools were not the only thing in this age. Cuneiform, the first writing system, was created, and agriculture expanded with the invention of irrigation. So, with that out of the way, how was this awesome alloy that led to a new age created? Blacksmiths were, and still are, a profession that is all about metalworking, making tools, weapons, and repairing broken things, as well as creating more intricate items like jewelry. This profession is what allowed for the spread of bronze throughout the ancient world. But how did the blacksmiths create this alloy? Simple. They melted down copper and, surprisingly, at least at first, arsenic, which, if you didn't know, is a poisonous carcinogenic metalloid that was used a lot in the 1900s in wallpapers, paints, treating wood, and is thankfully no longer used in those products today. So, that means the blacksmiths creating this type of bronze probably had many health complications, like cancer. However, later into the Bronze Age, people used tin because they realized that it made a stronger bronze alloy and was easier to cast into molds. So now that we know more about bronze and its history, this is where I come in. I'm going to try and create a bronze tool using similar technologies that blacksmiths had at the time. Now, without further ado, let's get all the stuff that we need to make some bronze. Now, all these materials gathered, got charcoal, so I can, that'll be the fuel for the fire. Fire bricks to contain the furnace that I'm going to build. I've got a mold, a crucible, tongs, and I've also got the metals, copper, and tin, which is how the alloy is created, and I chose a unleaded soldering wire, which is primarily made of tin, and some lighter fluid so I can get the fire going. Now, the first step is I'm going to be bake my crucible, right? And then while that's in the oven, I'm going to create the furnace itself. This time-lapse shows me building the furnace with the fire bricks that I bought at Menards. I started with a flat design, but I then realized that the furnace would be too short to actually have the crucible in it, so I changed the design, and yes, I am using painter's tape to hold the bricks together, and I was aware the tape would burn, and later the back wall falls because there's no support, but I do fix it by putting rocks behind it to hold it together. Alright, as you can see, couple different angles, right? This is what the kiln will look like, held together by hopes and dreams. Alright, now I'm going to be preparing the mold. So, as you can see, this is the mold for the axe head that I plan on creating for this project. I created the wooden container and the axe head shape with the help of my grandpa, since he has his own workshop in their basement, and then I poured in some high temperature resistant molding sand into the wooden container and pressed the axe head shape into it. However, it wasn't really holding its shape because sometimes I get ahead of myself and don't read instructions, because if I want the sand to hold shape, I needed to add water. So after I did that, the mold finally held its shape, and I now have a mold that can withstand that stuff. Okay. This may look ridiculous, but I need to preheat the crucible so it doesn't crack when I put it in the thing. I was told, through a little bit of research, that having... I didn't really explain it well to the camera because I was multitasking, but what I was trying to say is that hard lump charcoal gets very hot, and breaking it up with a hammer makes it even hotter. I'm gonna need a hammer for that, aren't I? It's very light, actually, which is surprising. I'm gonna get a hammer real quick. With the hammer, I broke up all the charcoal into small bits, and I put it into the furnace, leaving a little space in the middle to put down the crucible. And here's just a time lapse of me doing that. Since my crucible is not very wide, I had to flatten the copper pipe I bought with a hammer, and then I bent it back and forth to get the pipe to separate, which is a process called metal fatigue. During the entire process of building the furnace, I have had the crucible in the oven while slowly raising the temperature to prevent the crucible from cracking due to temperature shock. I am also showing the process of me lighting the furnace on screen. At this point, I have moved the crucible from the oven and into the furnace. However, I did not film that part because I did not want to risk dropping or breaking an object that was over 500 degrees Fahrenheit. I also wanted to note that apparently my oven can get up to a maximum of 550 degrees, which is pretty dang hot. And it is also hotter than the melting point of tin, which is 450 degrees. So, at this point I have now lowered the tin into the crucible, and I am now going to heat it up even more by adding airflow with a hairdryer that I bought. Now, you can see at this point the furnace looks different because the tape is all burned away at the corners, and the back wall fell when I tried moving the lid at one point, but I fixed it by adding some rocks to hold the walls together, so it all is good. Now, the process of melting the copper was very slow because its melting point is 1,984 degrees Fahrenheit, and it takes a while to bring it up to that temperature, especially because every time I had to remove the lid, the temperature dropped, and I had to wait for it to heat back up after I re-added charcoal for fuel. Alright everyone, here is the profaned moment. I'm gonna try pouring my thing, the molten metal, into that cast. Let's hope everything goes well. It in fact did not go too well, as you are about to see. The crucible itself had eroded, and that part was my own fault because when you heat a crucible, the airflow around it needs to be shaped like a mini tornado so it evenly heats the entire thing, and also doesn't have the heat directly blasting the side with the air pushing at it. Now, what I had was just blasting heat on one side so it got degraded. So that meant I couldn't use the tongs I bought specifically for the crucible and had to use the fire pit tongs that I used to grab wood with to move the crucible. As you can see, the crucible is very hot. Now, when I first pour the crucible into the mold, two separate things drop into it. First is the tin because it splashes out like a liquid, then the bronze chunk plops out. I was pretty annoyed at this point. Are you kidding me? Now, the reason the bronze solidified was because the second furnace configuration with the rocks holding stuff together had the crucible in a slightly different position than the first one. Because the first configuration had a bed of charcoal, then a flat rock, then the crucible on top of that flat rock surrounded by more charcoal. Now, the second had the crucible sitting at the bottom of the furnace, just sitting on top of the fire bricks, and that was surrounded by charcoal. And so that small difference of not having heat directly below the crucible was enough to drop the temperature below the melting point of copper. Now I want to talk about the differences between the methods I used to create bronze and how people in the Bronze Age created bronze. The first thing I want to talk about is the furnace itself. A real Bronze Age furnace was a bowl shape dug into the ground, lined with fired clay to prevent moisture from entering and to act as an insulator. It had 1 to 2 bellows, which are things that are manually squeezed by people to add airflow to increase heat to the furnace. Now, the furnace itself would have been very nicely insulated due to the clay and kept a lot of heat trapped inside. Now, my furnace was built out of fire bricks and was a lot smaller too. It also leaked a lot of heat, as you can see by the clip on the screen. And another difference was the actual metals used to create bronze were different. I used a copper pipe I bought from Lowe's and some soldering wire for the tin. Both of these items have very high purities, around 99% or more. Now, in contrast, during the Bronze Age, they did not have a Lowe's they could go to buy high purity metals. Instead, they used raw ore from the ground. This is why the first bronze alloys discovered were arsenic bronze, because the ore from the ground was a type of copper arsenic sulfide, which means at first the purity of bronze was actually not that good. Now, just because I was unable to fill my mold with liquid bronze does not mean that I failed entirely. If you look at the images on the screen, this object does not look like copper and tin. It looks like a completely different color. After letting the chunk that plopped out of the crucible cool overnight, I sanded it until the gray exterior turned to this new bronzy color. Now, because I was unable to melt all the copper that I had, it means that this piece of bronze has a higher percentage of tin than standard bronze. However, I noticed that one part rung like a bell when it was struck by my finger, so I did some research, and it turns out that bronze, made with higher percentages of tin, is used to make, bells and cymbals, which I thought was very interesting. Overall, this project has taught me a lot about the Bronze Age and the intricacies of metalworking. By having me go through all the steps to create bronze, this project has made me respect the profession of blacksmiths even more than I already did. Thank you for watching.